Right, morning year 10. So science revision day. I am not going to go through any content now. I'm not going to talk about any new science content. I'm going to talk about revising in science specifically. The resources that are available to you through school and some things that are good places to start and how to do them. I want to start off by saying how impressed the science department as a whole have been with how engaged you have all been with our webinars and with the work that's going out. Some of you have made actually great strides with what you're doing. Some people have joined us a little bit later on. The bubbles have really helped. It's been fantastic getting to see people during the bubbles and people's engagement, perhaps that found it harder offline, on offsite, to actually start engaging when we were having the bubble. So that's all absolutely fantastic. And anything that you're doing is going to help. Now, one of the questions that we have all been asked quite a lot over the last few weeks is, what can I do at home once we're in the summer holidays or in September that would help me with my science? Now, one of the things I want to be really clear is, as a science department, we're not saying we think you should be revising over the summer holidays. We're absolutely not saying that. But people keep asking me, if I do, what should I be doing? So this webinar is going to explain the things that you can do to start revision. Now, when you choose to do that, if some of you are going to choose to do that in the summer holidays, that's kind of your decision. Although, really, this is for September. But it's going to show you where everything is. And what you can do is practice with it over the next 2 weeks while you're in bubbles at school, and while you're at home going through other things, just so that you know where all of it is. So first thing is, I've shared this folder with you here called Revision Materials Year 10/11. And I sent you all a shareable link to that this morning by email. I need to stress, one of the things on there says that you can't access this folder if you're not using your school email. Please don't be emailing me from a different account asking for access. You have access through your school email, and I don't want to change that, because when we change that, then people are able to edit documents and it all gets a little bit messy. You can make your own copy of any document in here. So if you want to write on one, you can start your own folder, science revision, and you can copy any of these documents into it, and then you can write all over it and you can do what you like. That's what people in the past have found really useful. So I'm just going to talk through what's in here before I talk through some of the things that I think will be really useful. Now, the first thing that's in here that's useful are the tick lists. So these are the lists of everything in a given topic. So if I have a look at C1 here and we go through, we've got atomic structure, there's everything in C1, in atomic structure, the periodic table and so on. Now, some people prefer to use those. Let's get rid of that one, sorry. Some people prefer to use those, whereas other people quite like to use the prep schedules. I personally think prep schedules are better, but I've left both in there because some people prefer to use the prep schedules. So the two that are in there at the moment, I put the first two in there, B1 and C1, but they're all going to go in there over the next day or so. I'm just moving them across and cleaning them up a little bit. So the prep schedule is a good place to start having a look at things, because it's broken down really neatly into topics. So first topic in C1 is atomic structure. There it is, and there's the things that you need to know about atomic structure. So if we looked at the first three things, here are links to GCSE Pod or freesciencelessons.com that go through those topics. So you would need to be able to use the periodic table to identify the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons on an atom. You may or may not remember how to do that, but there is a playlist here that will explain how to do that for you if you can't remember. And then down the side are some questions. Now, if you watch the GCSE pods or the free science lessons, or you read the pages, sometimes it gives pages from the revision guide, and then you're able to answer those questions, you know that topic, you know the answers to that. So the prep schedules are great places to start. But what I really want to talk about is the easy places to start, and I will go back over those in just a moment. I need to make sure that I get back to here. So tick lists, prep schedules, and then we've got slides, and I'm going to show you slides in a minute. So slides, in there we have got the slides that we use in class when we are expressly teaching revision. And they contain mostly factual information, but I'm going to go through those in a minute, and some questions. As well as that, we've got some past papers and mark schemes and lists of 6-mark questions. Now, when I say lists of 6-mark questions, if I give you a quick look at this one here, here is every single 6-mark question that there hasn't been in B1 for the last 10 years. Okay, we have got a lot of 6-mark questions all put into one place, and I'll explain why in a little while. So there you go. That's your revision materials folder. It's got lots of things in it that are really useful. The other thing we're going to keep using is we've decided we're going to keep using our YouTube channel. And the reason for that is that there are things like required practicals that when we are back at school in September, we're going to go back over all of our required practicals. And we've realized that YouTube is a really good resource for us, because we will be able to record us doing those required practicals and talking about them, and then putting it up there so that you can watch it anytime you want. Why do we think we should do our own? The reason is that when you watch them on freesciencelessons.com or Primrose Kitten, they use slightly different equipment to what we have in school. And if we use the actual equipment that you're going to use, it makes it a lot easier to remember. So there's your resources. And I've said we're not expecting you to do it over the summer, but over the next 2 weeks, I would like you to try something. So what I would like you to do is think about this. The things that you should start revising are the things that are actually really easy to revise. And the reason for that is there are lots of things that you can revise on your own because they're just a case of having to remember things rather than understand them in any way whatsoever. And that's always where I would start revising, because it's something that's nice and easy to do. Now, the way that I would do it is always by making flashcards or drawing something out on a piece of paper, and then looking at it. The act of drawing it and making flashcards is not the revision. That's preparing to revise. The revising is looking at it, turning it over and trying to draw or write it out again without looking back at seeing what you missed, correcting it, trying it again, and then coming back to that a day or two later. So the things that I would start with, well, I've put the slides up here for B1, C1 and P1. So those are all things you did in year 9. And if we think about B1, that's something you did right at the beginning of year 9. So you perhaps will have made some microscope slides out of onions. The room stank of onions. You put some iodine on. Hopefully people are sort of going, yeah, I remember doing that. You looked at some different cells. Well, there's something to begin with. That's a brilliant piece of revision to start with. And lots of people go, yeah, but cells, that's really easy. I don't need to revise that. But maybe you do. Do you know all of the things about cell structure? Could you draw out and label an animal, plant and bacterial cell and label it correctly and say what each of those structures that you've labeled does? If you could, brilliant. That's something you're never going to have to do again if you can already do that off the top of your head. But if you can't, that's an easy piece of revision to start with. It's a really easy thing to be doing on your own. Because all you need to do is find a good diagram of a plant and an animal cell and draw them. Doesn't have to be a masterpiece of art. Those of you that I've taught know that my drawings are terrible, and I failed my art GCSE, but still I can draw a diagram that represents it. And then label them. And then practice doing that without looking, and keep doing it until you actually can do it. And there is something that you've done. That's it. Why would I start with something like that? Because it allows you to be really successful at your revision straight away. And that helps build a little bit of speed. You could then do the same things with specialized plant and animal cells. If I go a little bit further down here, okay, these slides provide you with all the information you need to do this revision. So there are the specialized animal cells that you need to know, and there are the specialized plant cells that you need to know. What do you need to know about them? Well, the main thing that you need to know about them is what structures have they got that make them good at their specialized job. You don't have to be able to draw them. They are never going to say, draw a neuron, right? It's a really difficult thing to do. So you might want to sketch one when you're revising so you know what it looks like, but you absolutely don't need to be able to draw them. So those are the things I would start off with B1. Something more complicated, microscopy. So hopefully you remember that required practical. It's a really easy one to find. So if you go back to the B1 tick list that I had open a moment ago, there is a link to a video on the microscopy required practical. What you have to know for that is the method. You have to be able to write the method out roughly in the right order. So there are some things that you could try with B1. Other things that this works with really well, components of the blood, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and plasma, and what each of their jobs are. These things really lend themselves to just doing retrieval practice, flashcards and recalling. I've got a question, so I'm just going to have a little pick. Right, I'm going to answer questions like that at the end. I'm going to come back to that at the end. So those are nice, simple things to be revising. The things we're starting off with and the things that I'm talking about are things that are fundamentals of science. So going through cells, going through components of the blood is an absolute fundamental. If we went on to C1, things that would be worth revising on C1, well, atomic structure. Being able to work out the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons and describe them. That is something that's an absolute fundamental of chemistry. And that's the sort of thing that it's easy to revise by just making a flashcard. What about the properties of the alkali metals and the halogens? Again, what are the alkali metals? Name them. What are the properties of them? Halogens, name them. What are the properties of them? Okay. I'm going to come back to those. I'm going to come back to those questions in a minute. I can see the questions popping up. I'm actually doing this on my own, so I don't have another teacher with me at the moment. So I'm going to answer questions at the end. It has to take less than half an hour. This isn't going to be more than another 10 minutes because I have another Zoom to do after that. Okay. Now, so those are some basics. Some biology. You could look at cells. You could look at blood. If you want to do something more complicated, you could look at the flow of blood through the heart and remembering the path that blood takes as it goes through the heart. But again, it's just a sequence. If I get onto physics, physics is a bit different. So those are all of the topics in physics. That's the whole lot. That's everything. But if I come back to the revision materials and go into my revision sheets over here, here is a set of physics equations. Now, it says at the top, to learn, okay? These are the equations that you need to actually know. Now, we have done all of these before. These were done in year 9. You've met these equations before. They have happened before. Now, people tell me that they can't possibly learn all of them. Well, then don't. There you go. Set yourself a task of learning 3 of them. If I said learn the first 3, most people go, oh, well, I can do that. Once you know the first 3, then you would be able to move on to doing other ones. To make it even easier, I've done this. So within here, we've got this revision sheet here, but I then got one that's blank for the actual equation. So there are just the terms and the units. That's what you would have in an exam. You would have those units. You would know, they would say, this is the kinetic energy, this is the mass, what is the speed, this is the power, this is the energy transferred, what was the time? And you have to try and get the equation that goes with it. So to make it even easier to revise them, what you would need to do is get this one and be trying to learn those 3 there, and then you can use this one to test yourself. Where did it go? You can use this one to test yourself by seeing if you can now write the equation into those boxes. And I would start with 2 or 3 at a time. Okay, so those are some of my hints for the first 3 things to revise. And those are things that you could be trying over the next 2 weeks, because myself and Miss Bush have got some Zoom meetings today with some people, but we're going to have some more next week where you could come back and you've tried revising some of those things and you would like to find out how to test yourself, or you would like some help. So what am I saying? First thing I'm saying is, please, over the next 2 weeks, look in that revision materials box. Look at B1, C1 and P1 in particular, and maybe pick something nice and easy to revise and practice that over the next 2 weeks. Say, okay, by the 17th of July, I am going to know the first 5 equations off that P1 list, or I am going to be able to name all of the components of blood and their function. I'm going to do something nice and easy like that. I'm going to make a flashcard, I'm going to do it, and if someone asked me, I would be able to answer those things. That's going to show you how revision works well for you, and it will also do something that's useful, because knowing those things is useful. Why is it useful? So I can see I've got lots of questions. I am going to come to them in just a moment. So how is it useful? Well, this gets on to the next section. Now, my next webinar, which is at 11:30, is about 6-mark questions. Because the other thing that it's worth doing is practicing how to answer a 6-mark question. Now, I'm not going to talk through that now, because I know that 6-mark questions fill people with fear and anxiety, but actually there is a technique to answering them, and practicing that technique over and over again makes it really easy to answer 6-mark questions. So in here, I did show you there was a whole load of 6-mark questions. One of the things I don't want you to do if you start practicing revision is go for the higher level practice, which is doing past paper questions and 6-mark questions unseen, because those two things are much more advanced and require, I think, a little bit of input or at least feedback from your teachers. If you are really, really confident, if you're the sort of person who's already working at a level 7+ and you feel really confident, then absolutely you could move on to doing those things. But otherwise, I strongly suggest that you keep it with getting factual recall working, or practicing seen 6-mark questions. And I'm going to talk about that in my next webinar. But I'm going to really briefly say what I mean by that. So if we went to our B1 questions here, how you practice a seen question is you say, okay, I am going to describe and explain the changes in the body during exercise. I'm not going to test my memory at this point. I am not going to see if I can recall those facts, because that's about flashcard revision. And the flashcard revision, you either have or you haven't done response to exercise and listed them all and said why they happen. That's a flashcard to remember. What you do when you do a seen 6-mark question is that you go away and you look up the changes, but what you see if you can do is actually write them down in a logical sequence. It could be a list or it could be prose that both describes them and explains them. And you look at whether you can do that. First, whether you can do it, and secondly, you start to look at whether you can do it when you're timing yourself. And what you should always do with this is pick 6-mark questions that you look at and think, well, that's easy. Those are the ones that you should start with first. And then we look at slightly more complicated ones. So now I've given you 3 things to do. One is to look at this revision folder. Make sure that you do that at some point over the next 2 weeks. So you have the whole of today. Today is science revision. So first thing you need to do is go through that folder. Then from B1, C1 or P1, you need to pick something simple to revise. You're looking at cells, specialized cells, or blood as the easy things from B1. If you want something complicated, because actually you can remember things like that really well, look at enzymes, the names of them, where they're found and how they work, or the development of drugs. Those 2 things are more complicated, but also can just be remembered as sequences. P1, it's equations. Unless you can write them all down, it's equations. C1, again, the things I would look at here that are nice and simple to do, atomic structure, or the alkali metals and halogens. Those are nice, easy ones to look at. If you want something more complicated, perhaps be looking at the extraction of aluminium and electrolysis. Okay, so that's what I want you to be looking at today. making flashcards, trying to recall those things and looking at how they work. Look at the prep schedules, okay? Start to look at the videos in the prep schedules. And if you come to the next webinar, which I'm hoping you're all going to do, particularly the people that are at school, that's going to go through how you could start to practice 6-mark questions without actually knowing all of the science, but just practice doing them. Right, now I'm going to work through the questions that people have asked me. I'm going to be no more than 5 minutes because I have another Zoom after this one. Right, do I expect there to be any changes in the science GCSEs? My answer to that is I don't know the answer. There are lots of things being discussed at a governmental level, and I am not going to make any assumptions. I'm going to work on the assumption that we are doing our GCSEs. The things that I have suggested revising are fundamental basics of those topics. If anything was to change, it isn't going to be cells, specialized cells, blood, enzymes. Those are fundamentals of biology. Those aren't things that are going to change. Is there a list of equations we need to learn? Yes, I've showed you where that is. It's in the revision sheets in the revision folder. How do we find out what equations are given to us in the exam? In that folder, there is also a copy of the equation sheet of the ones that you get in the exam. One at the top says to learn, the other one just says equations. The one that says to learn are the ones you don't get given. What's the first paper that we will do? It's always B1. B1 is always the first paper. It's quite often the first exam as well. It's very normal. What about the Science One-to-One tutorials? The Science One-to-One tutorials are times for you to ask questions about something that you've got stuck on or that you find difficult, or if you want guided to a specific thing that you could revise personally that would be a good idea. That's what the science tutorials are for. Miss Bush is doing all of the triple and really higher tier ones, so you're working at level 7 or above, or you're currently studying triple. I'm doing all of the other ones. Her sign up sheet is in the triple classroom. Mine is on an email to you. I still have some spaces for today. If the GCSE is made easier, no, it won't make it any less of a qualification. It'll be about the amount of work that you did against getting tested on that, and your ability to remember 90% of the work that you did will be the same no matter how much that is. Would revising through the summer help? That's a personal issue. For some people, doing bits of revision over the summer is something that will make them feel comfortable and secure and will help them remember things in September. For other people, doing work over the summer is not going to be a helpful thing for them because they'll feel lost and worried about it. And I think you need to be honest with yourself about whether it's something that, yeah, I could probably do a little bit of this and learn some of those equations, and that would be a good thing. And yeah, it will help. If you know the equations already, or even 5 of them, then that's something that you don't have to learn at a later date. The people that often revise over the summer, even when we don't have coronavirus, are those people that are looking to study medicine, for example, and need to practice revising extensively anyway. So sometimes those people choose to, although often not. I'm not saying you need to do it. I'm saying if that's going to make you feel better, then that might be something worth doing. How long should it take to revise each paper? Well, that depends, doesn't it, on how much you already know. If you're sitting there going, right, I can remember the parts of a cell, I know what eukaryotic and prokaryotic is, I can remember how to do that microscope practical, it's not going to take you very long to revise that section in Biology 1, if that's already in your memory. If, on the other hand, you can't even remember doing that in B1, it's going to take you a little bit longer to revise each paper. When we're back at school, we are going to be spending 3 or 4 weeks on each paper, making sure that we've gone through back each one. We were always going to do that. We've always had that time in planned in. The first thing, obviously, we're going to go back over is P2 because you've done it off-site, and we want to make sure that you're really clear on it. I think I've covered all of the questions. I think that is all of the questions. Can I record the next webinar? Yes, I will record all of the webinars that we do, always do in science, and post them on our YouTube channel and in your classrooms. Right, unless there are any other immediate questions, I am going to stop now. I think I've given you some things to do over the course of the day to start with, but what would really help is if you go away and have a little look at those for half an hour and then come to the next webinar on doing 6-mark questions, because that's something else that you can practice, particularly if you're doing the higher tier. That will be more useful to you. And these are things you can practice over the next 2 weeks. And in particular, you can try that today. Okay. And also have a think about signing up to our small group Zoom sessions during the course of today, and having a little look at the ones that might pop up next week to help you with things that have been difficult here. Really impressed to see quite so many year 10s here today. I've got more questions popping up, it says, but I can't actually see them at the moment. I'm having a little look. Has all the triple content been covered? No, we haven't done space, but space is the easiest part of the whole of physics, and that's what we will be doing first in September. What are we doing today? Revising. Yes, I've given you some tasks to do. You need to go through that folder, have a really good look at all of those resources, look at the 2 prep schedules, and then pick a simple thing to revise and be making some flashcards and looking if by the end of the day you can have remembered perhaps 3 or 4 equations, maybe 5, or all of the parts of cells or blood, and making sure that you have done those things. Anything else? Where do we find the slides? You've got an email from me this morning. It's a link to a folder called Revision Materials for Year 10 and 11. And in there, okay, you've got this folder here. And where you find the slides, it's in the one that says slides. There you go. The prep schedules are in there. Tick lists are in there. Wouldn't expect you to, the equations are in revision sheets. Please don't be looking in 6 markers and past papers yet, or science for year 11. Those are things we're going to show you how to use later. What I'm trying to show you at the moment is how you can do your revision using these things. The physics book we have doesn't cover anything. Are there more detailed books? Yes, there are, and I will share some links to those over the course of this week. What websites do I recommend? The things that I recommend are freesciencelessons.com. It is quite frankly brilliant because it's really short and to the point, and each video is no more than 4 minutes long, makes it really good to look at. Primrose Kitten, although her videos tend to be 45 minutes long, and you have to then stop and start it if you're looking at particular bits of the topic. And obviously all of the ones that myself, Miss Bush and Mr. Collins have made on the Science YouTube channel. I hope that helps. I am going to have to stop it now, however, as I really do have to start another Zoom in a couple of minutes. So thank you all very much for coming. I hope that has been useful to all of you, and I will hopefully we'll see you in the next one at 11:30.